Welcome back. This is part 2 of a 2-part look at Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneersohn of righteous memory. If you haven't watched part 1 in its entirety, I suggest you do, as there will be more than a few terms the viewer may not be completely familiar with. Among our topics in this episode, we will examine the false accusations sometimes leveled at the Chabad of praying to the dead, and examine the chief aspects of the Mashiach debate. This is an absolutely must-watch episode, so please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's learn together as we receive more insight into the Jewish sages. In 1951, the Rebbe gradually transformed a small Hasidic community into the largest and most widespread Jewish movement in the world today, establishing a network of more than 3,600 institutions that provide religious, social, and humanitarian needs to over 1,000 cities, spanning more than 80 countries and all 50 American states. But the Rebbe could not have achieved this without the crucial foundations being previously set down by a man that he loved and respected above all other men. The person I refer to is none other than the Rebbe's father-in-law, the Fritchik Rebbe, which means the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneersohn of blessed memory. He was the 6th Rebbe and a very heroic leader, maintaining a strong network of support to Jewish communities behind the Iron Curtain. Communists had created a Jewish affairs section designed to instigate anti-religious activities and strip Orthodox Jews of their religion. In 1927, Yosef was arrested and imprisoned in Leningrad, accused of counter-revolutionary activities and sentenced to death. Western governments and the Red Cross put pressure on the communist regime, commuting the sentence, and he was finally allowed to leave Russia, later visiting the Holy Land and then visiting the US in 1929. He later returned to live out his last decade in America. During this time, the Fritchik Rebbe was already physically weak and ill from his suffering at the hands of the communists and the Nazis and from multiple health issues, including multiple sclerosis. But amid all this, he had a strong vision of rebuilding Orthodox Judaism in America, and he wanted his movement to spearhead it. He went on to lay a lot of solid foundations, which the Rebbe built and expanded upon after his appointment to the 7th leader of the Chabad. The Fritchik Rebbe passed away in 1950 and was buried at Montefiore Cemetery in Queens, New York City. He had no sons, and his younger son-in-law, the Rebbe, would visit his grave very frequently to pray. Many people over the years have wrongly criticized this practice, citing it as praying to the dead, which it certainly wasn't. While it is customary to pray within the vicinity of the remains of a deceased Tzaddik, it is not permissible to direct one's prayers directly to them or any other deceased person. Chabad.org state the following concerning such a tradition. Quote, "The rabbis were apprehensive that frequent visiting to the cemetery might become a pattern of living, thus preventing the bereaved from placing their dead in the proper perspective. They wanted to prevent making the grave a sort of totem at which the mourner would pray to the dead rather than to God, and thereby violate one of the cardinal principles of Judaism, that God is one and there is no intermediaries between man and his God." End of quote. Furthermore, regarding one's conduct for prayer at a gravesite, the following is written from the same official website. Quote, "Much care must be taken to direct one's personal prayers at a gravesite to God. To pray to the deceased or to speak directly to him in the form of a prayer borders on blasphemy." End of quote. It is sheer necromancy outlawed by the Bible in Deuteronomy 18:11. Along with sorcerers, soothsayers, and enchanters. Those who wish to level accusations at the Chabad for praying at gravesites of Tzaddikim might want to review the core reason why Miriam, Mary Magdalene, and 4 other women went to Yeshua ben Yosef's tomb. Their visit would have almost certainly been customarily accompanied with prayers and blessings. Also, too, it is worth noting that when an Orthodox Jew goes to visit the tomb of a Tzaddik, he or she is also taught to go there with the expectation that the Zaddik's body may have been lifted up or risen. Would anyone accuse Ezekiel of talking to the dead or practicing necromancy when he was actually directed to prophesy to dry bones? No, of course not. Accusers of necromancy by Chabad speak with planks in their eyes and inadvertently sound like the very same Pharisees that Yeshua HaNotzri rebuked. Orthodox Jews have a genuine belief that Tzaddikim will one day rise from their graves, like they did on Mass in Matthew 27, and to be present with a loved one when this happens would be an overwhelmingly joyful experience. David HaMelech wrote in Tehillim 16:3, "For the sake of the holy ones who are interred in the earth, and for the mighty, all my desires are fulfilled because of them." A relative or a student of a deceased Tzaddik prays near a gravesite for inspiration to pray with more kavana, that is, spiritual concentration.
Want to tell the Rebbe the words of the new song that we're singing with Mashiach, right? So I'm just going to read him. Am Yisrael, have no fear. Moshiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. Okay?
The most publicized criticism of Chabad is the false assumption that the Rebbe portrayed himself, or at least played up to the belief that he was Mashiach. It's important to know that the scriptures allude to the reality that there is a spark of Mashiach in every human being. In many ways, the Rebbe followed the instructions of the Pharisee Rabbi Shaul HaShliach, who the world calls the Apostle Paul, who taught in 1 Corinthians 11:1, "Imitate me as I also imitate Moshiach." Rabbi Yeshua also assured his followers in John 14:12, "I tell you the truth, the person that believes in me will do the same things I have done. Yes, he will even do greater things than I have done." You might be thinking, well, the Rebbe didn't believe in Yeshua. Indeed, his only reference point at that time was the Christian interpretation, yet despite this, he would never willfully overlook the observance of Torah, which is the equivalent of renouncing Yeshua based on the ruling that if you love me, keep my commandments in John 14:15. While no Messianic would verbally disavow their allegiance to Yeshua, their handling of his commandments is pretty shaky at best. This is even more interesting in the light of Yaakov HaZaddik, James the Just's words, where he says, "You believe in one Elohim. Good for you. Even demons believe this, and they tremble in terror." This is from James 2:19.
Mourning the death of the Lubavitcher rabbi has been difficult for his followers because most of them believed he would never die. Today at the Lubavitcher synagogue in Brooklyn, they ripped their lapels in sign of mourning and said they still believe Rabbi Menachem Schneersohn will be physically resurrected as Mashiach, the Messiah.
That the rabbi is going to rise up in his grave and come back to life?
Absolutely. A physical resurrection when he's going to come back in his full glory imminently and redeem the entire world, us included.
It's a test of faith. The Rebbe is really alive and with us.
The question is, will the Rebbe resurrect as the Messiah or not? Now that's where we run into the gray area.
So some Orthodox Jews mistook and still mistake the Rebbe to be the Mashiach. So much so that they set up a replica of 770 in Jerusalem so that if the Rebbe does return, he will have a familiar place to set up as his headquarters. But before everybody loses their minds, turn to Sefer Rav Silas, that is the book of Luke. Go to chapter 3 and start at verse 15. The people were waiting expectantly and were all wondering in their hearts if Yochanan, that is John, might possibly be Mashiach. Yochanan answered them all, "I immerse you with water, but one more powerful than I will come, the thongs of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. He will immerse you with the Ruach HaKodesh and with fire." Yochanan HaMatbil, who the world calls John the Baptist, swiftly rejected this suggestion, as did the Rebbe on several occasions. The Rebbe actually said that whoever claims and continues to claim that he is Mashiach should know that they are going to war with him. If someone mistakes you for Mashiach, not because you tell everybody that you are or you play up to it, but just because you are practicing righteousness, then you're probably doing something very right, as long as you vehemently deny it. The development of the idea that the Rebbe was Mashiach started in the 50s. The earliest proclamation was circulated by Rabbi Avraham Pariz. In 1952, Pariz printed a poster proclaiming him as the Mashiach. When word reached the United States that the poster had been seen all around Tel Aviv, the Rebbe immediately forbade its distribution. Then in 1984, some Hasidim started chanting a song that referred to the Rebbe as our righteous Mashiach, who will come and redeem us. On hearing this, the Rebbe abruptly called for the song to cease. And in 1991, another song began to circulate proclaiming, "Long live our master, our teacher, and our rabbi, King Messiah, forever and ever." After the Rebbe's debilitating stroke in 1992, this song was routinely sung in his presence. Articles that mention this fail to also say that the song "We Want Mashiach Now" was also routinely sung in his presence. Just because a church might have a custom of singing "Jesus Lives" in the presence of their pastor doesn't automatically mean that they think that their pastor is the Messiah. In 1992, a senior Chabad rabbi and youth movement director, Shmuel Butman, organized a major rally in Crown Heights that was billed as the coronation ceremony for Rebbe Schneersohn as King Mashiach. Before the rally, Butman assured the press that the coronation of Mashiach was going to take place. The rally was attended by 8,000 people in New York and countless others via satellite link-ups around the world. When the Rebbe heard what was about to happen, he forced Butman to backtrack during the event, having him announce that his appearance did not represent his acceptance of the role of Mashiach. He then told all the assembled followers, plus many more around the world watching via satellite, that the event is not to be interpreted as a coronation. It has been also alleged that during the latter years of his life, the Rebbe's teachings were interpreted by many to mean that he was claiming to be Mashiach. But anyone who really listened closely to his teachings towards the end of his life would tell you he constantly spoke about ways to bring Mashiach. His teachings were frequently punctuated with an urgency for his followers to increase in Torah learning and good deeds to hasten Mashiach's coming. Why would he regularly say this if he thought that he was Mashiach? In 1972, a student at Brooklyn College by the name of Mrs. Chana Shafstein wrote a term paper for her sociology class called A Minority Within a Minority, a study of Lubavitcher Hasidim. The paper, which received an A, happened to be proofread by the Rebbe himself, and one correction is particularly noteworthy. Amongst the two passages of corrections, the following section revealed the Rebbe's reservation toward being associated with Mashiach. The original manuscript by Mrs. Shafstein wrote, "The present-day leader of the Lubavitcher movement is Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneersohn, the seventh generation of the original founder, Rabbi Shneur Zalman. The last Rebbe had no sons, but this Rebbe is his son-in-law. He is a highly revered spiritual leader of tens of thousands of Jews throughout the world. The chief difference between the Lubavitch and other Hasidic groups is that others are concerned only with their own disciples, whereas the Lubavitcher Rebbe regards himself as the spiritual shepherd of all Israel in his generation. He feels responsible for the spiritual and physical welfare of all Jews regardless of where they live or the extent of their religious belief." End of quote. Interestingly, the Rebbe wanted the following passage removed entirely. The Rebbe regards himself as the spiritual shepherd of all Israel in his generation. In its place, he requested the following: "The Rebbe's interests and activities encompass the spiritual and physical welfare of all Jews." End of quote. This change in the text not only exhibited the Rebbe's deep humility, but also how highly he regarded the role of chief shepherd, a common scriptural term for Mashiach. Certainly, if the Rebbe was interested in assuming this role, he would have allowed such a description to remain. So I think I'll end on this one final note. The Rebbe also prophesied to another very pious Jew that he would one day meet and find out the name of Mashiach. 16 years before his passing, Israel's leading known Kabbalistic elder, the late Rabbi Yitzchak Kaduri, was told by the late Lubavitcher Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneersohn of blessed memory that he would one day meet and learn the name of Mashiach. According to the revered teacher's closest students, such an encounter did eventuate in the month of November 2004. Rabbi Kaduri subsequently wrote a short note with instructions not to open until 1 year after his passing. I will not discuss the content of this note in this video, as it's best left to a video entirely devoted to Rabbi Yitzchak Kaduri himself, but suffice it to say, one Jewish commentator pleaded no comment in response to the note, but aptly quoted Mark Twain, "A thing long expected takes the form of the unexpected when at last it comes." Now, if the Rebbe was Mashiach, what is he doing telling another revered sage that he would meet and find out the name of Mashiach? Thanks for joining me again on part 2 of Insight into the Jewish Sages, the Rebbe. Hey, before you go, if you like this series and you want to find out much more, check out our books, All Lights On in the Master's House, Lightning from the Master's House, Flying Chariot, Fallen Dragon, and Is Alcoholic. all available on Amazon.com and other online bookstores, and help us to continue to spread the word. Also check out our website, Netzarim.com, where we have many teachings and resources on a myriad of subjects that will enlighten and enhance your walk. Bye for now.